You are one of the most profitable shops I've ever seen. Today, I really want to pick your brain on KPIs and numbers. Can you tell me a little bit about your KPIs and what you're tracking?
It took a long time for us to understand what were the meaningful metrics, knowing what makes you successful and what makes you money. If you look at the data set over time, what we found was
Meet Bill Kerry, owner of Kerry Brothers Truck Repair. He's an expert at using data-driven KPIs and AI to transform diesel shops into high-growth, high-profit machines.
Running a shop is a mathematical formula. That is all it is. It is not your feelings. You literally have to put pen to paper.
once you want to grow, having SOPs, having a clear defined workflow and process. How do we take this and dial the process in? We've been able to dial those KPIs so effectively that we've added 3 locations since July of 25.
I think more shops need to understand that we in this industry do a horrible job of selling what we do. We are horrible about building value in what we do. We have a tendency to make everything about price. It's not about price. So what kind of KPIs are you really tracking?
Probably the single most important one that we found.
Welcome to Diesel Stories. I'm your host, Peter Cooper, where we sit down with industry experts. Today's guest, Bill Kerry with Kerry Brothers Truck Repair. Bill, thanks for being on today.
Hey Peter, thanks for having me, man. I always good talking to you and love what you're putting out into the space, and I think it's wildly beneficial for everyone involved.
So you've been on before on the Shop Owner Roundtable, but today I really want to pick your brain on KPIs and numbers. I think it's really a topic that a lot of shop owners don't talk about. It doesn't seem like it's a big priority. But I really want to talk about you because I know you've got some really unique takes on numbers and you've done a deep dive on it. Can you tell me a little bit about your KPIs and what you're tracking?
Yeah, so you know, it all starts back like 2023. I read the book Traction. Gino Wickman, EOS, you and I have talked about it a bunch, but really finding a way to come up with a cohesive scorecard that not only every department from a high level, but every employee in the company has a score and they know what a win looks like every day. So once you start down that rabbit hole of wanting to track everything you're doing, it never stops, right? So it took a long time for us to understand what were the meaningful metrics. And I've heard you say it over and over again, right? Like people love doing engine rebuilds because they're this huge dollar engine and, maybe relatively lower margin, but what does it cost you in opportunity cost of what could have been in that bay? What do you make on a brake job compared to an engine overhaul or after treatment work, and really, really dialing it in to knowing what makes you successful and what makes you money, right? So we've been able to dial those KPIs so effectively that, we've added 3 locations since July of 25.
And I want to ask you about that, your growth and kind of what you've got going on. Tell us a little bit about your history, where Kerry Brothers came from.
So, 1985, my dad and his brother quit a local truck repair, rented a horse and buggy garage right here in Detroit at a dairy company that went out of business, and started just fixing trucks. Right, growing up as a kid, my dad was on call all the time. Similar story to yours, Peter. Right, he did anything that he could to make money and service the customers, and I worked here as a kid, waxing the vans and tow truck, emptying the garbage to, in high school, doing oil changes and brake jobs and kind of learning the business. And in 2006, I was going to night school and my dad walked in and said, "You're fired." So this place will always be here. Go do something else. I don't want you to be stuck doing what I've done my whole life. Right. And I left for 8 years and got a world-class education in the business of hard knocks and operations, sales, and decided I wanted to come back to the family business and Be an entrepreneur. So, I started back as a technician at $15 an hour, with a family at home, and, learned how to become a master tech. And then slowly my cousin and I were 50-50 partners. We started scaling the business and found out that, our customers really wanted a single reliable vendor for, a roof to tire, bumper to bumper experience. And we slowly grew into that. We just crossed the 100 employee threshold. And when I started in 2014, I was employee number 6.
So that's massive growth in 12 years. So this is, the Kerry Brothers been in business for roughly 41 years. What really changed and allowed you to grow? Like, what was the engine that drove that?
Really it came down to I realized that we had a product that was very different in the space, right? In the fact that these small entrepreneurial companies really just needed one throat to choke, right? So, once we realized like, hey, we're gonna start doing tires. If that guy can do tires, we can do tires. If that guy can do reefer work, we're going to do reefer work. We started adding on these services and bringing in the right people, frankly. And then a lot of our growth kind of happened in the end of 23. I had my partner retired. I bought his shares out and really was very, very focused on putting the pedal to the metal for growth. And that's when, KPIs really came into effect of how we could grow and what we had to do it and make money.
And, KPIs are one of the things that's near and dear to my heart. And I really tell shop owners that it is absolutely crazy that you pay a guy the kind of money that you pay mechanics, 35, 40, whatever it is an hour that we're having to pay guys now. And you turn them loose and you give them no standards. Like, it would be insane as a shop owner that we would give a guy an engine and say, rebuild it. And when he comes to us and says, well, where's the book with the specs? Oh, you don't need that. You know what you're doing. Just go overhaul the engine. Like, we would think that's insane. But yet that's exactly what we do to technicians every single day when we ask them to go out in the bay and say, well, go do good work. We've never defined what good is. We haven't defined what bad is. How does that employee ever know where they stand?
Yeah, and you know what? It's easy when you're small, right? You got 5 guys in the shop, you've got yourself, maybe another master technician, and you really just need some parts changers. And yeah, you can keep the quality up, you can give these guys hands-on experience, but then once you want to grow, you know, having SOPs and having a clear defined workflow and process, right? Like, you know, I don't want to blow too much smoke up your ass, but when you and I first met, you handed me a workflow paper and my head about fell off of my shoulders, right? So I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, my eyes were open to what the possibilities were for how to take this, rough and tough, right? This is not an easy job as a technician in this space. It's dangerous, it's dirty, it's cold, it's hot, it's physically exhausting, it's mentally exhausting. And how do we take this and, not only gamify it, but really dial the process in and then find what our technicians like to do and keep them doing what they like to do, right? And we needed to grow in order to provide that.
Well, and I think that's another valid point is I think a lot of shop owners need to understand that when you grow just for growth's sake, sometimes everybody gets lost along the journey. And a lot of shops need to understand that they're going to have to grow or they'll die just from the standpoint of they can't cover overhead. Let's use health insurance, for example. That's been a hot topic the last month or so with guys, you know, they can't afford health insurance. I think it's industry report that Fulby produced, State of Heavy Duty Repair report. Only 60% of shops are offering health insurance. And then we ask ourselves, well, why doesn't anybody want to be in this industry? And I'm not picking on individual shops. I'm looking at it from an industry standpoint. Like, why would anybody come into this industry if we can't even afford basic things that people are looking at as basic human rights now, like health insurance? So I think a lot of shop owners need to take a really hard inventory of what they're doing. And it's like, if you can't afford these things, why can't you? And I always go back to numbers. You don't understand numbers. You are not making a factual based decision. You're making an emotional decision. And I tell shop owners all the time, look, running a shop is a mathematical formula. That is all it is. It is not your feelings. It's not looking at something and say, well, I think that's a good idea. You literally have to put pen to paper, like figuring out your labor rates. So many guys worry about what the guy down the street charges. That has nothing to do with what you need to charge to stay afloat. So what kind of KPIs are you really tracking?
So probably the single most important one that we found along the way. And to your point, right? We were growing just for growth's sake because I realized that, at one point I think we had about 20 employees, right? And I was the service manager, the service writer, the parts orderer, the accountant, right? And I'm wearing all the IT, you name it, right? And I said, man, I need to replace myself. And in order to replace myself, you got to hire 5 people. And 5 people cost a lot of money. And I
I
didn't want
do.
to take it out of my pay. So, in order to even do that, you had to find a way to create that profit in order to make that investment. And it doesn't happen overnight, right? You're investing in people and it is expensive, right? And especially after you've been training somebody for 60, 90 days and then you realize they're not a great fit, it gets even more expensive. I mean, at one point I was just, people would walk in the door and be like, you got a pulse and you can stand, you start today, right? Here's the, we just kept blank uniforms. Here, put this on. I got all kinds of sizes. You start working, right? And getting to the point of how we could actually manage it once we got all these people was the KPIs of constantly monitoring what our parts margins were, right? And breaking it down probably, you know, too far, right? So dialing in, what you can mark up a brake valve to what you can mark up OEM parts to what you can mark up, after treatment parts, and then doing the real digging and searching our history to find consistency in what we were able to charge the customer previously, right? So those were like the really big ones that we were able to focus on and really understand where we were buying parts, what parts we had to stock, and then we developed when we found full bay matrices, man, we went crazy, right? We got 100 matrices and some of them have 50 lines up, right? So, but then you can find out which customers can be on a specific matrix, right? One guy might be looking at the price of his oil, but doesn't give a damn about the price of his brake drums, right? So, it really took a lot of that fine tuning on parts pricing that we had to dial in. And that was the first stuff we started to look at, right? And then, Full Bay is an amazing tool in utilization and efficiency. If you look at the data set over time, what we found was there's a one-to-one relationship in utilization and efficiency. So going back about a year, we went to the guys and we're like, listen, we are professionals, right? Our reputation is we're professionals. You are professionals in the fact that you are highly skilled labor. Not everybody can just walk out and look at a YouTube video and do what you're doing, right? So we have to account for all of your time as if you were a lawyer or an accountant, right? So we have to capture all of that time. And then watching those few things helped us dial in what was gross profit margin. How do we categorize direct labor, right? And then, going as far as to us now, the single most important KPI is gross profit per hour. So, you know, tires, for example, right? Tires is, a horror's game out there and race to the bottom, low margin on the labor side of things. But if you look at what it is in a gross profit per hour, it's one of your most profitable lines, right? If you manage it the right way. So that's where we really, really focus on what produces the highest gross profit per hour. And that can be broken down into individual technicians, individual categories of work. And that's where we really dove in on the full base side to break this stuff out and be very, very specific about how we mine the data.
So you hit on two really good points there, labor and parts. And I want to do a little bit deeper dive on parts. I think that shop owners need to focus on parts more than anything. As a matter of fact, do that first. And here's my philosophy of why. The average repair shop, for every $100 in labor, you sell $100 in parts. Say you got a shop doing $5 million a year in revenue. You probably need 6 technicians to hit that $5 million, give or take. You only need one parts person. So what's the most efficient thing you can go after first? In other words, I'm a big believer in tackle the biggest problem first, EOS theory. Because if you tackle the big problem, it solves a bunch of little problems. So go after parts first. Why are parts so important? Parts are not a necessary evil. Parts are a profit center. And people need to see it that way. You need to make money on parts because it's half of your total revenue, right? So many shops, it's 50% of the revenue and they give it zero thought. And I really like the way that you've approached it. And you are one of the most profitable shops I've ever seen as far as parts goes. And it's not just because you charge a lot. Like that's the least of it. It's because of the way that you do it. You bring in a parts pricing strategy, which really, I hate to say this because so many people are going to think that this is so anti what we do in this industry, is you have to use psychology. What is a person willing to pay? If I go to a fleet manager and say, I'm going to charge you $3,000 for an air compressor, they're going to find out what that part costs. They're going to look it up, right? I can't charge a 300%, a 300X on it, right? I can't mark the part up 3 times, but I can do that with the O-rings. That guy is not going to call Cummins and find out that that $22 O-ring was really $5. They're not going to do it. And so we have to start using some parts pricing strategies. And I tell people probably the easiest thing they can do to start, if they don't want to get really complex into it, is have a different matrix depending on who the vendor is. Because then that way, when you bring the part in, it automatically will mark it up in full bay by vendor if you do it that way. And most people, this is a general rule of thumb, most people use different vendors for different types of parts. Perfect example. I'm buying tires from X. I'm buying radiators from here. I'm buying OEM engine parts from here. I'm buying aftermarket engine parts from here. And that is by far the easiest way to do it in most systems. And it really doesn't matter which system you're using. If you're using Mitchell or Full Bay, it'll allow you to do it that way. Now you can go to step 2, which is now we're going to do things by category: tires, filters, lights, tires, and brakes. Now that takes an extra step in most process because you have to class that part every time it comes in. So it is a little extra work. It's not as automatic, but here's the thing. This is where all the money is. There is so much money to be made in parts and parts pricing strategies. And honestly, how do you know how much a customer will pay for something until you try? I mean, you got to look at parts like going to an auction. What's a truck worth? Well, it's worth whatever they bid on it today, right? And that's kind of, parts are kind of similar to that, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's really comes down to how you can put the data in the right way so that you can mine it, right? You might have an 89 air dryer, for example, right? Let's say air dryers. If you can categorize it, we found that using house part numbers was the best way for us, right? Because this guy might have an RX part, an Automan might be a 109 dot or whatever the case is, but let's just put them all into the same house part number. So then we can see, hey, here is our volume on this, right? Now I know that I can sell it at X. I want to go buy 20 at a time and negotiate with several different vendors to be able to pick up an extra 15% margin. So we were able to do that a few times on parts. And then you have enough dollars that you can hire somebody that's really, really good and dedicated to just doing that, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's something too that, these are actionable takeaways that people can use now. It doesn't matter if you're a 2-man shop and the owner is the lead tech, the payroll, the AP, the AR, and he's got a helper. You could still use these philosophies. Now, you might not be able to strategize and leverage economies of scales that you've gotten to, but you absolutely can go after parts pricing strategies. I think air conditioning is another example of areas that people are willing to pay way more on. And the example I give is, I have a property in Phoenix. The air conditioner went out. It's got a renter in it. The renter calls me. I'm like, oh my God, it's 105 degrees. What do I do? So I call an HVAC guy. Bill, can you believe what the margin on Freon is in the HVAC world?
Couple 300%.
589% markup on
Yeah.
Freon. And
Tell
that's the
someone
going
else,
rate.
pal. Yeah.
Like I called the guy out on it and he's like, dude, you can call around. I charge less than everybody else for Freon. And I'm like, he was right. And why can we do that? Why? So let's get into the psychology of that. Why are we allowed to charge more for certain things than others? Because it's a non-negotiable. I've seen a lot of drivers, they'll drive a truck with bald tires, but they will not drive a truck with no air conditioning.
And to your point, right? We found it best that we give away a lot of free shit, right? Every single truck that comes in, all your lights, all your fluids are checked. We do not charge labor for that, right? 102-point inspection, we do not charge labor for that. So that when a customer does complain that my Freon is really expensive, I have the argument of saying, well, man, but look at all I got to make money, right? Like we both agree that I need to make money. As long as I'm making money, you're getting the right product. I'm able to hire the right people that can do a good job, right? And it really requires that education to the customer that, hey, as long as your total cost of ownership of this vehicle is cheaper with me than it would be, say, leasing from Penske or Ryder, or getting your service done at the dealer, or your time in shopping out the cheapest tire guy, the cheapest suspension guy, the cheapest tow guy, the cheapest engine guy, right? So, as long as you're able to continue that relationship with the customers, that's where we've really focused on. We really don't want to deal with, a big giant company, and we want to focus on the relationships that these guys can rely on us, and yeah, we're able to charge more.
Well, and you brought up a good point, and that is, I think more shops need to understand that we in this industry as a whole do a horrible job of selling what we do. We are horrible about building value in what we do. And we have this tendency, because it is seems to be lately, it's just a race to the bottom. We have a tendency to make everything about price. It's not about price. I interviewed the VP of Night Swift, and you know what he told us in that interview over and over again? Price is not the most important thing, guys. How fast you can get it done and can you get it done right? That is way more important to us than saving $5 on a radiator. And I'm not saying they don't care about price. Like you have to be in the same ballpark. But when push comes to shove, owners need to learn to ask really important questions of their customers. And I used to have a saying, and people thought it was way too blunt, but I would get to the point fast. I would just ask a customer, what do you have more of, time or money? And they would ask me, what do you mean by that? And I'm like, if you're not in any hurry, man, we can wait 3 days and get aftermarket parts and save you a boatload of money. Well, no, I got to have the truck done today. I said, okay, well, then that means we have to go buy the parts we can buy today, and that's going to be expensive. Oh, that's okay, man. I just need it done today. So now I've built value in what we do. I've also given the guy an option, and he chose the more expensive route. So when I show up with a bill, I can charge a good labor rate. I can charge higher margins. And you know what I can do because I do that? Now I can afford to pay health insurance and I can hire the best guys.
Yeah, and that goes for, in the same token of if you do mobile work or towing or, just even emergency road service. Hey man, I got to show up with a vehicle that has I got to be able to afford to put safety lights on this thing. I got to have flashers. You want my truck breaking down on the way to come to see you and save you off the side of the road so you can go deliver your load? Like we have to make money. I'm not saying we're getting rich, but we still have to make money, right? And in order for us to continue to provide the highest quality of service, we have to be able to hire really good people, and we got to be able to pay them. We got to make them have skin in the game, right?
Absolutely. And here's the coldest, hardest reality that we all need to accept in this industry. We all do the same thing. Bill, you do the same thing that your competition down the street does. You know what makes you special and what allows you to be profitable over them? It's how you do it.
Yeah.
And that's why I want to get back to KPIs. So, talking about numbers and what we want, I'm a big believer in keep it super simple philosophy. So I could distill every position of my building down to 3 numbers. And an example of that was I could tell a service advisor exactly what I expected from them every week. I expected 62% gross margin on a job. I needed $1,400 average RO, and I needed X number of work orders produced per week. If you hit those 3 numbers, this magical thing happened. We made money.
Yeah, so that's where KPIs for us really really got wild and crazy, right? 62% is a great number, but are you going to make that if you're selling OEM parts? No. Are you going to make that if you're doing trailer work? Well, you better be making more than that, right? Are you going to be making that doing tires? No. So we were able to take all of our categories and slice them and dice them down into, I got crazy with this, right? $500 intervals of, you know, this job, this category, and then building the guardrails so that we knew exactly what we had to make and what our expected margins would be inside of each of those categories. And we went as far as, you know, hiring a third party AI company to come in and just hammer through our data to build this interactive dashboard that he's now out in the market working with Full Bay to get, launched for Diesel Connect, called Truck Genius. And it is really the entire data set that you have in at your fingertips.
So, Bill, let's talk about numbers and doing a deep dive. And, what you're talking about doing is above and beyond what most shop management softwares will allow. And you've said that you're starting to use AI to sort the data. Can you show us an example of what you're doing and kind of how you're interpreting the numbers and what it leads to? In other words, what findings are you getting that were like aha moments that you're like, oh my God, we should have known this years ago?
Yeah, so Peter, here's a demo with, some names, disguise, different data set, but to give a general overarching idea, we can slice this into specific time periods and, compare how one shop is performing over another, right? And this is high level, just, of a 6-month period here or a 4-month period of just, what each location is doing. And then it gives us the ability to track monthly revenue trends and then really see what the invoices were that went through each one. And from a high level, like our parts manager lives in this every single day to see where and how we are making money and where we're not, right? Like what are all these? And we better have an answer because they have a expected parts margin that they have to hit. So when I was referring to gross profit per hour, right? We can build trends and set KPIs and scorecards that these guys have to trend towards. And then we want to know what customers are most profitable and which customers are least profitable for us. So when we start to dive through individual customers of gross profit per hour, you know, maybe these are guys that we want to focus more sales support to find out what their fleet is comprised of, right? So really this helps dive in on what vehicle type are we most profitable making and working on. And that's where our sales efforts are going to be focused. So that's, from here it's a high level of, let's see, I can pick on this guy, $57,000, you know, gross profit 64%, but we're at $239 of gross profit per hour. And I could come down here and bang through all of his invoices in the click of a button. And all this is doing is just putting all the full bay information in one location, right? And from a management standpoint, I really want to know what technicians are the most profitable that I have because
Absolutely.
we use this as a straight driver of how do we give raises and what is the scale in which these guys can operate, right?
So, real quick fact, just for everybody that watches this on which technicians are the most profitable. This is actually something I pick on when I do shop evaluations. And I think I've done it with you, Bill. And that is here's a sheet of paper, owner. I need you to list in order from 1 to 10 which technician you have is the most profitable. And most people equate who is my best technician with who is the most profitable. And a lot of times shop owners are usually right for number one. Like their best tech probably is the guy who bills the most. He's the most profitable. But the thing that absolutely blows their mind is the guys in the middle. You'll find out that your lube tech, your tire tech that is all the way at the bottom of the pay scale is actually the third or fourth highest grossing, highest producing technician you have. And they get treated like crap. And then they wonder why they don't stay in the network, they don't stay in, the industry as a whole. It's because we judge people on things that don't even matter. Like, we're judging our technicians on facts that are not good facts. And I think this is a perfect example of a tool that more shop owners need to know how to sort this data so that they can do raises and do pay scales based on what really makes money. I mean, I had a guy come to me one time, was a road tech, and he's like, "You guys are taking advantage of me. You're not giving me enough money." And I'm like, "Okay, well, let's sit down and look at the facts." And we pulled it up and I showed him pen to paper on the software that he produced less revenue than the tire tech. I said, "I don't think you want her wage. She's making like 14 or 17 or $18 an hour." He's like, "No, I don't want that wage." I said, "Well, then you need to go figure out how to make more money, because if you make more money, I could pay you more."
Right, and that's where this was really illuminating for us to be able to pull this information, right? So, if you're loading your text pay scales, and we use like a 20% escalator in full bay for their hourly wages, and this figures out the real margins that you're getting on what they're doing, right? So this is a tire tech. Out of his $87,000 in revenue, 72,000 of it was in part sales, right? And what does that equate to? $311 of gross profit per hour. And, he's highly efficient. Margins are below what we are setting as a threshold as a company, but he's producing dollars. We don't deposit
Right.
margin in the bank percentages, we deposit dollars, right? So this was huge for us in order to understand like what these guys' effective labor rates were based on what shop they were working in, what they work on, how we categorize these things. And then we really set a firm threshold that no one was really allowed to make more than 30% of what they produce. So whether it be hourly, bonus incentive, commissions, this was a massive tool for us. And then, we can do this by service advisor. We can see which service advisor is writing what dollars, who's hitting labor margins, who's hitting parts margins. We can click on this. I can see every order they wrote and what they're doing, right? And then similarly to component systems.
So this is information. Let's do a deep dive on this, because this is the real meat and potatoes of what I really want owners to understand. And that is that not every type of work you do is profitable. It's not good work. And so you actually have visibility on something that almost most softwares don't have. And so show me kind of how you can break this up by component and system type.
So this is how we slice it up, right? So chassis maintenance is pretty much anything that is general maintenance. After treatment, pull that out, tires out, and then body repairs, right? So we try to look at it as what is the entire chassis, whether it's a box truck, a tractor, a tow truck. We categorize that straight into chassis. And then this is how we've been able to dial in exactly what makes us the most money and what work we want to do and what we want to get, right? And it's just that cut and dry. If you start going through here and you're curious as to, why your parts margins on something that's 4.6% of your revenue is lower than, what you're trying to accomplish, then you one click and you can dive in. I mean, as you can imagine, high dollar after treatment work, we have a lower parts margin than what we would have on doing wheel seals and marker lights. But looking at what those dollars are and what this equates to, these guys are able to produce essentially $189 of gross profit per hour that they're working. So this is, one aspect from a high level of really diving deep on the KPIs. There's a lot more of this in like employee statistics, and we're able to slice and dice revenue, utilization, efficiency, and then we give this tool to, all of our service managers or team leads, and they're going through the team's efficiency and utilization every single morning in their morning meetings.
So give me an example. Have you had any aha moments after you've done a deep dive on this data where you've learned something that may have been counterintuitive, if you will?
You name it, man. I mean, every time I go in here and spend time and dive through what it is that is really what we're doing is an aha moment. And once we figured out how to use this, it just became like a second language to our team on on how they manage their own teams. And then it levels the playing field, and there's no hiding in this, right? So it really enabled us to build a solid, consistent recipe that we've been able to, move to, we're 5 locations now, and hopefully ending the year will be close to 8 to 9. So, this is the formula for us on being crystal clear on things not falling through the cracks. The service advisors, you got one guy that's got a really good relationship with the fleet guy that brings it in, and if he's writing the estimate to him, we find out that, why is this customer underperforming on last month as far as margin goes? And you start diving in and go through, and you're like, damn, he's not charging them shop supplies, or he's overriding the shop supplies. What the hell's going on there? Like, hey, dude, why are you overriding the shop supplies? Well, he bitched the one time. Well, let's give him an education. All of a sudden, we got the shop supplies revenue back, right?
Yeah, and that actually brings up a good point. I've had this discussion with service advisors specifically on shop supplies. I had a service advisor come to me one time and say, nobody wants to pay shop supplies. I said, who's nobody? Well, there are all these people that are mad about it. I said, cool, let's keep track of it. I need actual hard evidence of who. The end of the month, it was one guy. But
Yeah.
one guy chewed his butt so hard over it that it left such a lasting impression. I think as owners, we have to really understand something, and that is perception versus reality. And we perceive something and we think it is, but are we using facts and numerical values or quantitative values to back it up? Like the shop supply is an example of. Yeah, one guy didn't want to pay shop supplies. It was one guy. Okay, fine, then we'll take it off for that one customer.
Right.
Whoop-de-doo, you know? But we got to be able to get this stuff because we have to pay for everything. So was there any decisions, anything that you realized when you look at it? Like, do you have any specific examples of because you had the data and you had numbers, you could go against the current and realize something in the industry?
Yeah. I mean, for us, it
Yeah,
was how do we build a model to where the team leads had ownership over their results, right? So, every morning in the morning meetings, it was, all right, hey guys, we're averaging 85% utilization. All right, new standard as an entire company, we are not to be below 95%. And why is it that we cannot be below 95% for technicians? Well, one, you're telling me we have enough work in the parking lot, right? So we got a 3-day backlog, and yet then there's no reason that anybody should be less than 95% utilized, right?
absolutely.
And how do you compare a team of 3 people with one supervisor or a team of 10 people with one supervisor? Is that one supervisor that much, more talented, more skilled to be able to run this group of 10? Well, maybe that guy needs to go train the guy that does 3, right? And then it really built this model of everybody working together because they had the numbers in front of them and it's at their fingertips, right? And being open with these guys of, hey, listen, we're all here to make money. And if we make money, that means we can continue to grow and scale. And what does that do? It provides more opportunity to everybody involved, right? So, the biggest aha moment that, we're just rolling out right now is a fully detailed plan of how a technician can go from not knowing which end of the screwdriver to hold at $18 an hour to make $45 an hour. And then from $45 an hour, they can move to a team lead and get incentivized by how much their team produces. They can move to a building manager and get incentivized by how the P&L of that entire building operates. And then you could start at a small location, move up to a bigger location, move into a regional position. And for us, it was really showing the entire company these opportunities that they have, that our primary focus is to hire within before we bring somebody in from the outside.
Yeah, I think you brought up a lot of good points. And one is, you've built a culture. And a lot of shops have to understand that you have a culture, whether it's by on purpose or it's by accident. It exists. But you're really truly building a culture of accountability, and you're doing it through numbers that can be measured and numbers that are shared. And I think that is the most powerful thing you can do in scaling a business is because nothing's ever going to be perfect 100% of the time. And how do you build a culture where people want to do good work? Well, number one is you got to teach them what good work is. And if you don't have numbers to hold people accountable, they may think they're doing a good job, but how do they know? Like, how do
Right.
you really know as an employee? I mean, think about it. All of us out there had jobs at one point in time. We work for someone. How do we know if we were having a good job? Like my first job out when I left the farm was I cleaned airplanes for United Airlines. We had no metrics. I didn't know if I was doing good or bad. I got a paycheck every week, so I must have been doing okay, right? And then the shift from that is I go to a very well organized environment. I go to work for the city, working on transit buses. They have an apprenticeship program. You put in so many hours in each station, build. And it was like night and day difference. And these are two both massive companies, but they did things so differently. And, it's really amazing how your people will grow when you learn how to hold people accountable by numbers.
And you know what? I want to touch on that, Peter, because it's terrifying to do that from never doing it before, right? And you will absolutely lose people, right? People will, they'll immediately know this is not for me, man. I can't come in and screw off today, right? Like
Yeah.
I can't go take in the bathroom for a 20-minute hide, right? It limits that, but it is that the person you want, right? Oh, he's a really good technician. He's always able to troubleshoot this, but you know what? What is he doing to the rest of your culture, right? He's going to bring down everybody else, and it's disheartening. And we lost some really, really good people, right? Guys that I worked with for 7 years side by side. But the minute we started bringing in accountability, you saw all these other people step up and other people stepped out. And it was for the best, because now it's, instead of using a whole bag of floor dry when some oil spills on the ground, these guys are, whoa, 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 hey, go grab the junk rags and let's mop it up first. And then we can just use a little bit of floor dry, right? Yeah, I don't walk through the shop and find connectors and zip ties on the ground anymore that aren't used. And these guys all know what it takes because we're open. Hey, listen, if the company makes money, everybody makes money, right?
Yeah. And that brings up a really good point. And that is that number one, culture matters. But you have to understand what are the foundational things you've done to build a good culture. And I am a firm believer in open door, open book policy. What I mean by that, I would literally run through the P&L every quarter with my employees. Like I was not shy about it. I had a saying in my business, Peter's here to get paid. I never wanted to work for a broke guy, and I don't want people that want to work for a broke guy, right? So people want to work for a shop that's making money. They want to work for winners. Let's just all be real about things for a minute. We all want to work for a winner. You don't want to go to work for a guy that's broke. Profit is not a bad word. And I had a rule in my business that we had an 80-20 rule. I'm taking 20%. Guys, I've got millions of dollars and years on the line. I deserve a return on my investment. But the great thing about that is you guys get the other 80%. So every time we make more money, I'm not taking more money. I'm putting it back in the business. And whether owners are open to that idea or not, just think about it. And I understand this may seem like a utopian concept, but really it works. It works in real world applications. I mean, how many businesses out there are ESOBs? Why do ESOBs work so well? Because they share the profits of the employees.
Yeah.
Yes, there are certain people that take a certain amount of profit. They deserve that. They're an investor. But it works on a macro scale. It works on a big picture scale in a way that you can never imagine. And to your point about culture, this amazing ancillary thing happens when you start holding people accountable. The people that are not accountable leave because they don't fit the culture anymore. And so I want everybody out there to understand that running a business, running a truck repair shop is like a bus route. There's this really good author called Jim Collins that has a theory about this, and I took it one step further. And that is that running a shop is a bus route, right? We all know where we're at. We all know where we're going. We are going there on a schedule. And you're free to get on the bus or off the bus, any stop you want. And we're not going to hold it against you. And that's perfectly natural. As businesses evolve, sometimes employees outgrow the business. For example, you get a guy who gets a perfect opportunity to go do nothing but build engines in an air conditioning facility. I can't blame a guy for leaving to go do that. I can't offer that opportunity. So he has to get off the bus. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with him. Nothing wrong with you. But the same thing happens in a business. It's just like the bus stop. Sometimes people get on, sometimes they get off, and that's okay. But ultimately, what you have to realize as an owner is you need to know who's on the bus and who's not. Like, and that's the way we addressed it in my businesses is I would ask the managers when they would bring up somebody and basically tell me they're having a problem. I'd be like, well, is he on the bus or not? They're like, yeah, he's on the bus, but we got to fix these. Say, cool. Then let's keep him on the bus. And if
Yeah.
he's not off the bus, it's time for him to get off.
And to your point, people want to work with winners also, right?
Yes.
And they weed each other out and saying, "Hey man, you're not carrying your end of the stick here, right? Like, hey, we're all rowing the same thing and you know, you're not rowing nearly as hard as we are." And to be able to put bonus incentives out to a department, they want, "Hey, listen, I'm dependent upon you doing a great job too, right? Like, so I can't carry the whole load by myself." So it really did in that culture aspect, it really helped us drive a culture of we all want to win, right? And how do we win? We win by taking care of our customers and taking care of our people, and the money will come after that.
So I'm going to go a little bit deeper on this. Let's use an example of a shop and a basketball team. I'm not a big sports guy, but I understand the analogy enough to use it. And that is imagine your team, all the people that work for you, like a basketball team. And truly to have a award-winning basketball team, you need a lot of support staff, right? There's coaches, there's trainers, there's all these other ancillary support staff, managers, all these other people. And if we think of the technicians as the players, how many sports teams keep an underperforming player?
So I think there's two ways to look at that, right? There are get it, want it, capable, right?
Yes.
So from EOS, thinking along those lines, if they get the job and they want to do the job, but they're not quite capable yet, that guy I'm keeping, right? I'm not looking at the basketball season of I got to just make money this year. I want to develop somebody who's going to become the next Kobe Bryant or Pippen to support the staff, right? I mean, not everybody wants to be a $45 an hour master level technician. Some guys just want to come in, they want to know what they have to do today, they want to do oil changes all day. No problem. That's great. But that guy, as long as he gets it and he wants it and he's going to do a good job, we can teach him the capabilities, right?
Right. And that brings up a really good point too. And that is that it is so much easier for you to scale a business and have managers make good decisions when you give them criteria. And what you're doing is you're starting to take the emotion out of determining whether someone can work for you or not. And I don't want to sound like I'm completely heartless, but the thing is how do you teach your manager, your store manager, when it's time for a person to go? If you expect them to use feelings and you have no facts to back it up, how are you ever going to have a synergistic approach to the way you run your business?
That is a hard lesson to learn. And, documentation and the word process makes me want to jump out a window. So, I am not built for process and procedure. I'm more of a cowboy, but fortunately, in the seat I'm sitting in, that's okay. But process and documentation and coming up with accountability to your point, right? Of, hey, we have a 3-strike process, right? Like, so if the first strike, we're gonna listen. I'm gonna remind you. Hey man, we had this conversation again last week. Hey, we had this. Listen, all right, now I have to document it. Now it's in writing. We can't have this conversation again, right? So it was. It took a long time for us to figure out how to. We just took the best technicians and made them managers. Well, that's a terrible idea.
It's horrible.
But with the right training and really instead of just saying, "Here, go run this department," we had to train, we had to build a system around how they could manage, right? And how they could motivate people. And it's a hard thing to do, but I can tell you from where we're sitting, it was worth every blood, sweat, and tear that went into it, right?
Well, and another thing too that you didn't admit in your comment you just made, and that is it's okay not to be that guy. It's okay not to be the detail guy. You know what the thing is? Stop asking how to do jobs and just ask who can do it.
Yeah.
And I understand that when you're really small, you do have to wear many hats. But as you grow, owners have to learn to let go and be like, that's not my genius. And if it's not my genius, I'm not doing it. Like for me, that was accounting. I hated accounting. I hated everything about it. Like it's like chalkboard and nails on a chalkboard for me. I don't want to do it. That's fine. I paid somebody else to do it. Right. I went and did what I was good at and what I enjoyed. And That's probably the key to success. The single biggest key to success for owners out there is go do what you love doing and just find someone to do the rest.
Yeah. For me, it's being the bad guy. I do not like being the bad guy, right? So I had to hire somebody and be like, all right, you got to be the bad guy for this one. Like, I'm the culture guy, right? I'm going to go out and tell everybody what we're going to try and do, how we're going to be all this successful and we're going to make money. And I don't want to walk in and fire that guy, right? Like, I hired him. I'll hire people. I'll bring them in. I don't want to fire him. I'm
It's
not.
actually funny. It's funny you say that because I'm the exact same way. I hated that dealing with that. So I just brought my wife in. Her nickname was the Hatchet Man. So it was kind of funny that, you can do that. And we already do that in our business. We just don't actively realize that's what we're doing, that we're trying to fill in our weaknesses with people that are stronger at that task. But when owners really learn to embrace that, you get this sense of fulfillment out of your business that you've never seen before because you actually enjoy going to work. I tell owners, look, if you get the Sunday blues, you got a problem. And the problem isn't that you hate your job. The problem is you're just doing the wrong thing.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting because people ask me like, "Well, why do you work so much? Like, we got to get you to stop working so much." I'm like, "Dude, I'm working so much because I love it. I wake up every single morning and can't wait to go to work." Like this morning, I had an idea in my mind. It's 3:30 in the morning. I'm like, "Ah, I'm up. I'm going to work." Got here and got a bunch of shit done. But it's because I love what I do every day, and there isn't the Sunday blues for me are, oh my God, it's 5 o'clock at night. I got to go to bed, guys. Guys, I'm out, right? I got a big week ahead of me. So
Right.
yeah, it's a different movie when you find the right people to do the jobs that you don't like to do.
Well, it's an amazing story, and some of the things that you shared with us today, Bill. We really covered some awesome topics. We covered, how you can build an effective culture in a business by using KPIs, and I really think that that's something that more shop owners need to put more emphasis on. And that is that you cannot grow a business on a shaky foundation. And the only way to build a solid foundation in this industry is through factual numbers. You have to have numbers. You have to have KPIs. And amazing things will happen. So I really appreciate that. Thanks for sharing Truck Genius with us and, kind of how that's able to help you, Bill.
Yeah, man, it's been a game changer, Peter. I'll give you a ton of credit. And since you and I met, you've blown my mind on how to look at my business, and gave me the tools to run with it. So I would say to any other shop owner out there, if you want to know, Peter knew me when we had 20 people here, and I was the guy holding the duct tape, running around in circles. So appreciate all you've done for the industry and all you've done for me personally. So thanks for having me on. It was great, and yeah, look forward to seeing you at Diesel Connect. Here we go.
Ah, look forward to seeing everyone at Diesel Connect.
There we
But
go.
I do want to put one extra thing in there at the end, and that is this conversation is exactly why I do this. It's exactly why I do podcasting. And it's the message I'm trying to get out there. And that is that it is capable. You can get out of your own rut, and success is obtainable for everyone. This is not a finite thing. And we also need to see in this industry, it's not us versus the shop down the street. It's us versus the dealers. And we really have to understand that we can all work together and learn from each other and be very successful in this space.
Yeah, it's us versus the leasing companies.
That too. That's a good point.
Yeah.
So, all right, Bill, thanks for being on.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for tuning in to Diesel Stories. Be sure to follow the show on your favorite podcast platform and join us next time for more shop talk, insights, and stories from the diesel repair world.